Some nights feel endless. Some roads stretch longer than they should. Some passengers never reach their destination. Ethan Reynolds thought he was just another driver on just another night. A rideshare pickup at midnight. A woman waiting under a flickering streetlight. No bags, no phone, just a crumpled piece of paper with an address that doesn't exist. At first, he thinks it's a mistake. But the farther he drives, the stranger things become. Streetlights blink in perfect patterns. The same sentence repeats across every radio station. His phone buzzes with messages from himself, messages he never sent. And then there's the woman in his back seat. She doesn't just know his name. She knows things about him that no stranger should. She doesn't check her phone, doesn't ask for direction. She just sits there like she's been here before, like she's done this before. As the night spirals into something Ethan can't explain, he begins to question everything. Is he losing his grip on reality? Or is there something about this ride, something about her that he's been running from all along? And the most terrifying question of all, what happens when they finally reach the last stop? Ethan Reynolds had been a rideshare driver for 3 years, long enough to learn that the city never truly slept. There was always someone needing a Ridian airport drop-off, a last-minute bar hop, a shift worker catching a late-night commute. But tonight felt different. The streets were quieter than usual, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. Even the radio stations were off, just static, like the city itself was holding its breath. It was almost midnight when the ride request came in. The pickup location was an empty street. No businesses, no houses, just an old gas station that had shut down years ago. Ethan hesitated. Something about the location set off warning bells. But money was money, and ignoring a fare meant getting penalized by the algorithm. With a sigh, he tapped accept and drove toward the destination. When he pulled up, he expected to find a drunk, a lost traveler, maybe even a prank. Instead, she was already waiting. A woman in a dark gray coat stood perfectly still beneath a flickering streetlight. She wasn't looking at her phone like most passengers, nor did she seem surprised to see him. Instead, she just opened the car door and slid into the back seat. Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She looked ordinary, mid-30s, dark eyes, short, cropped brown hair. But something about her felt off. "Where to?" he asked, forcing casualness into his voice. She handed him a folded piece of paper. Not a phone, not an app notification, just a handwritten note with an address scribbled in bold, deliberate strokes. 243 West Hollow Road. Ethan frowned. That street name sounded familiar, but something about it nagged at him. He typed it into his GPS. No results. I think there's a mistake." "There's no mistake," the woman said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Just drive." Ethan hesitated. "I need an actual location. My app isn't picking this up." She finally met his gaze in the mirror. "I know." A cold prickle crawled down Ethan's spine. Something about the way she said it, like she already knew this would happen, made his skin crawl. But then she settled back into her seat, staring out the window as if the conversation was over. Ethan sighed, switched his GPS to manual mode, and started driving. He'd figure it out when he got closer. That was his first mistake. 15 minutes into the drive, Ethan noticed the first glitch. It was subtle at first, just a familiar intersection appearing twice, as if he'd looped back without realizing. Then, a street sign ahead suddenly blinked out of existence, reappearing only after they passed it. "Are you seeing this?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. The woman didn't answer. He turned on the radio to drown out his nerves, but the same sentence kept repeating across every station. A monotone voice, over and over again. "You can't stop what's already begun." Ethan's stomach twisted. He shut the radio off, gripping the wheel. Okay, what the hell is going on? Still, the woman didn't react. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. A new message from an unknown number. "Do not take her to the destination." His pulse spiked. He glanced at the mirror. She was staring straight ahead, expression unreadable. A second message buzzed in. "If you get there, you won't exist." Ethan slammed the brakes. The tires screeched as the car jerked to a stop. The woman finally spoke. "Keep driving." Ethan turned, his voice shaking. "Who the hell are you?" For the first time, her expression shifted just slightly. She looked sad. "You already know," she said. And that's when Ethan noticed something in the rearview mirror that shouldn't have been possible. Her reflection wasn't hers. It was his. Ethan's chest tightened. He turned sharply in his seat, expecting to see something, but she just sat there, calm, waiting. "This is a joke, right?" he asked, his voice thin. "A trick?" The woman tilted her head. "If I were you, I wouldn't waste time on denial." Ethan's breathing grew shallow. "I wouldn't waste time." The words hit him harder than they should have. He turned his phone over, checking the sender of the cryptic texts. No number, no contact information, like they'd come from nowhere. He stared at the woman again. "You're telling me you're—" She finished for him. "You." His blood ran cold. "Number." "That's impossible." She leaned forward, locking eyes with him in the mirror. "Then explain the reflection." Ethan forced himself to look again. His reflection moved slightly out of sync with him. The delay almost imperceptible, like an echo, just a few beats behind. "This isn't happening," he whispered. The woman, the other, him sighed. "I don't have time to explain everything, but you need to turn the car around. Now." Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tight, his knuckles turned white. He wasn't just going to accept this, he was getting answers. And then his phone buzzed again. A third message. "If you turn around, she dies." Ethan's mouth went dry. She meaning him? His stomach twisted as he realized there was no right choice. One road erased him. The other erased her. And somehow, some way, he had already taken this ride before. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened as his heart pounded against his ribs. His mind screaming that this wasn't real, that it couldn't be real. But the woman in his back seat, the one wearing his face, his voice, his existence like a second skin sat perfectly still, as if she already knew how this conversation would end. The phone in his lap buzzed again, another text appearing from the nowhere number. "Choose." One word, sharp, final. Ethan's breathing came fast, uneven. His eyes darted between the road ahead and the woman behind him, searching for something, anything that made sense. "This is some kind of sick joke," he muttered, barely able to hear himself over the hammering pulse in his ears. "A prank. A dream. I'm going to wake up." The woman, his reflection, his paradox, his ghost side, almost with pity. "You always say that." The words froze him in place. "You always say that." Not, "You would say that." Always. As if this had happened before. As if this had played out in some endless looping cycle, one he had no memory of, but she did. The woman reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out something small, something that sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through Ethan's Scooter ride-share phone, identical to his. The screen was cracked in the exact same way his was from when he dropped it last week. The case had the same smudge from where he'd spilled coffee that morning, and the screen, illuminated in the darkness of the car, showed the exact same text message he'd just received. "Choose." Ethan's breath hitched. His vision blurred at the edges. The air in the car feeling thinner, heavier, pressing in on him. The road ahead stretched endlessly into the night. No landmarks, no streetlights, just the void of a highway that shouldn't exist. "What happens if I take you there?" His voice cracked slightly. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer, but he had to ask. The woman, his other self, exhaled slowly, watching him through the mirror, her expression unreadable. "You disappear." Ethan's pulse spiked. "You mean I die?" The woman shook her head. "Not exactly." Something about the way she said it sent ice crawling through his veins. "Not exactly?" He swallowed hard, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. "And if I turn around?" The woman hesitated. It was the first time she had hesitated. "Then I disappear." The weight of her words suffocated the air between them. One of them would have to cease to exist, but the rules, the logic, None of it made sense. How could she be him if she'd already been through this before? This isn't fair, Ethan whispered. The woman let out a dry chuckle. You always say that too. Ethan's frustration boiled over, his voice rising. Then tell me how the hell I stop this. If you know what happens, if you've been through this before, then... The car's headlights flickered, and the road changed. It was no longer the empty highway he'd been driving on. Suddenly, impossibly, he was on a familiar street, one he knew too well, his childhood neighborhood. The houses, the sidewalks, the street signs, it was all exactly as he remembered it from when he was 10 years old. But there was something wrong. The street was too still, too quiet, and the houses had no windows. Just empty, blank walls where glass should have been. His stomach lurched. What the... It's starting. The woman cut in, her voice suddenly sharp, urgent. You have to choose now before it. The radio crackled to life, the static splitting into a voice's own voice. Ethan, it said. Listen, you can't take her there. The voice's voice was pleading. If you do, we all start over again. You have to break the loop. You have to. The radio cut out. Ethan turned sharply to look at the woman in the back seat, but she was gone. His stomach dropped. He snapped his head forward again, and a person stood in the middle of the road. Ethan barely had time to slam the brakes before the car screeched to a halt, skidding sideways, throwing him against the wheel. His heart was racing, his vision swimming, but when he looked up, the figure was already standing at his window. It was him. Another him, but this version looked worn down, exhausted, like he'd been through a war he couldn't remember. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, desperate. Get out of the car, Ethan. Ethan's entire body locked up. What? The man glanced behind him, toward the empty back seat, as if expecting to see someone there. When he turned back, his eyes were filled with something that terrified Ethan more than anything else. Regret. You've done this before, the man whispered. And you never get it right. The world around Ethan shook. The houses without windows seemed to pulse, the road cracking beneath the tires. The car's dashboard clock was spinning backward. The loop was resetting. Ethan felt something grip his wrist. He turned, the woman was back, but this time, her face was twisted in fear. Don't listen to him, she pleaded. If you get out, it resets. You'll be back in the car, back to the pickup point. You'll have to do it all over again. Ethan's pulse was a storm inside his chest. The loop? He was stuck in it, and every time he reached this point, he made a decision that led him back to the beginning. Pick her up, drive, choose, repeat. His other self was still at the window, his expression raw, desperate. Ethan, he said again, softer this time. It's time to wake up. Ethan's fingers twitched on the wheel. This was it. The moment. The loop was waiting for his decision. If he drove to the destination, he would be erased. If he turned around, she would. If he got out of the car, it all started over. No more time. No more second chances. Just one question left. What if this was the first time he was awake enough to break the cycle? Ethan's pulse was hammering as his fingers gripped the wheel, the weight of every possible choice crushing down on him. The version of himself standing outside the car was pleading with his eyes, while the woman, the other him in the back seat, was practically vibrating with urgency. The world around him felt wrong, unstable, like he was trapped in a dream that was beginning to fray at the edges. The houses with no windows pulsed, the road seemed to shimmer, and the radio flickered back to life with his own voice, echoing in distorted, overlapping whispers. You have to wake up, wake up, wake up! Ethan clenched his jaw. This isn't real. It couldn't be. No version of reality allowed for multiple copies of yourself, for roads to suddenly transform into your childhood neighborhood, for buildings to lose their windows like a bad rendering in a video game. Unless it wasn't a glitch in reality. Unless it was a glitch in his mind. The thought sent a deep, primal chill through him. He turned back to the woman in the back seat. If I drive you to that address, I disappear, right? His voice was steadier now. She hesitated. sensing the change in him. Yes, and if I turn around, you disappear? A pause, then a nod. Ethan took a slow breath, centering himself. And if I get out of the car, we reset? Another hesitation. But this time, she looked unsure. That was the crack in her certainty. The first real sign that she didn't actually know what happened next. Ethan shifted his gaze back to his other self standing outside the car. He studied his face, the exhaustion, the regret, the knowing. But it wasn't just that. It was familiar. Not in the sense that he was looking at himself, but in the sense that he'd seen that exact expression before. And suddenly, the floodgates opened. A hospital room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a machine beeping steadily, a person standing over him. That same exhausted, regret-filled look staring down at him. A doctor? No, a therapist. Ethan's breath hitched, the walls of his mind cracking open. He squeezed his eyes shut as the memories flooded back. This wasn't the first time he had been here. It started months ago. Ethan hadn't always been a rideshare driver. Before that, he had a steady office job, a normal life. But then the accident happened. A late-night drive. A moment of inattention. The headlights of another car blinding him for a fraction of a second. The impact, the scream, and then nothing. When he woke up, his world had changed. The guilt was unbearable. He tried to return to his job, to his life, but the weight of what had happened crushed him. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. He started seeing things, hearing things. Reality felt thin. That was when the therapy session started. That was when they told him about the disorder. Dissociative episodes, trauma-induced delusions, a mind trying to protect itself by warping reality. The road, the passengers, the impossible choices, they weren't real. They were constructs, his brain's way of trying to process the thing he had buried. The accident. The person in his back seat, the woman, the other him, wasn't him at all. She was the victim. Ethan's breathing came in sharp gasps as the pieces snapped into place. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and this time, when he looked at the woman, he saw her for what she truly was. Not a reflection of himself. Not a paradox or a time loop. She was the face he had avoided looking at for months. The person who had been in the other car. The passenger he had killed. Ethan's body locked up, every muscle tensing as a deep, gnawing terror overtook him. How had he not seen it before? The loop, the choices, it was never about him. It was about her. His brain had rewritten the story, shuffled the blame, split himself into pieces, so he wouldn't have to accept what he had done. But the moment had come. No more loops, no more choices, only the truth. Ethan turned slowly in his seat, facing the woman head-on. Her expression was no longer urgent, it was patient, knowing, like she had been waiting for him to figure it out. His voice trembled. "You're not me," she smiled softly. "No, Ethan, I'm her." His throat tightened. "Then what happens now?" Her gaze flickered toward the front of the car, toward the road ahead, the road that led to the destination he had been avoiding in his mind. "You already know," she said. Ethan swallowed hard. And then, for the first time since this nightmare had begun, he made the right choice. He put the car in drive. And finally, he took her home. Ethan sat outside the cemetery, the engine idling. The weight in his chest felt crushing, but for the first time in months, the fog had lifted. No more glitches. No more impossible roads or duplicate versions of himself. Just the real world. The gravestone in front of him bore her name. He had never visited before. He had never let himself. But now, as he stepped out of the car and approached, he finally understood why his mind had built this entire illusion. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Fear of accepting what he had done. Fear of facing the consequences of his mistake. But she had waited for him to wake up. She had waited for him to let her go. Ethan knelt before the stone, his breath shaky. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And for the first time, he meant it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could still hear the distant echo of a voice, the other version of him, the one who had stood outside his car, telling him to wake up. He had finally listened. And this time, the loop was broken. Ethan sat in his darkened apartment, the dim glow of a single lamp casting elongated shadows against the walls. His hands trembled as he poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling like time itself in unpredictable, chaotic loop he was finally starting to escape. He had spent the past 24 hours questioning everything he knew, everything he thought was real. But tonight, the truth was undeniable. He had ended the drive. He had taken the only road that mattered. But there was still one thing he didn't understand. The woman in the car. She wasn't just a hallucination. She wasn't just a passenger lost to the accident. She was someone else. Someone deeper. Ethan exhaled shakily, his gaze drifting toward the half-open box of old photographs that had been sitting in the corner of his apartment since the accident. He had never touched them, never let himself remember. But no, he had to. With slow, deliberate movements, he pulled the box toward him and removed the first stack of photos. His fingers sifted through the years' memories he had long buried. College parties, road trips, the first apartment he had ever rented, a photo of him and his best friend laughing in a bar, a vacation photo from the Florida coast, and then her. His fingers froze. The photo was worn at the edges, the colors slightly faded, but there was no mistaking the woman standing beside him. Dark, cropped hair, deep, piercing eyes, the same faint, knowing smile. Ethan's throat clenched as his mind fractured open once more, but this time not into illusion, into memory. Because this wasn't just any woman. This was his wife, Lena. The breath rushed from his lungs, his pulse roared in his ears, the past colliding into the present like a freight train. She had died 3 years ago, not in a car crash, not in some roadside accident. Cancer. A slow, merciless battle that had stolen her from him inch by inch. His mind had buried her face, buried her memory so deeply that when she appeared in his illusions, he hadn't even recognized her. The passenger wasn't just a passenger. The passenger was her. Ethan's vision blurred as he gripped the photo tighter, his knuckles white. Lena, he whispered, the name feeling like a ghost in his mouth. Why hadn't he remembered? Why had she been the one waiting in his mind? And then, deep inside him, he knew. He had never allowed himself to grieve. Not properly, not fully. He had drowned himself in distractions, rideshare shifts, long nights on the road, meaningless conversations with stranger Saul to avoid facing the truth. He had built an entire psychological labyrinth in his head, creating loops and passengers and false realities to keep himself from confronting the one thing he couldn't escape. He had been running from her. The guilt of moving on, the fear of letting go, the accident, the hallucinations, the delusions of time loops and doppelgangers. They weren't just about the trauma of that one crash. They were about her, about the pain that never left. Ethan wiped at his face, but he hadn't even realized he was crying. His shoulders shook, the weight of years of grief finally breaking through the dam he had built inside himself. He had been trapped, not in a repeating cycle of time, but in a cycle of denial. The real loop wasn't the drive. The real loop was his grief. Ethan took a long, unsteady breath, his fingers brushing over the photo one last time before he set it down beside his glass. He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city stretching before him, the real world, clearer than it had ever been. No more illusions, no more glitches, just reality. And for the first time in 3 years, he was ready to live in it again. Ethan's breath came in uneven gasps, his pulse hammering as he gripped the photograph of Lena, his late wife. The memories he had buried, the emotions he had suffocated beneath years of self-denial, all came flooding back in a single, suffocating wave. But even as he processed the horrifying realization that the woman in his illusions had been Lena all along, a new, deeper, more terrifying thought surfaced. He wasn't alone in the car that night. Something else was missing. Someone... Ethan clenched his jaw, his fingers trembling as he shoved the old photos aside, digging deeper into the past. He ripped open another stack, flipping through memories at a frantic pace. His hand stopped when he saw a photo from 5 years ago. A little girl, blonde, bright-eyed, sitting in his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck. His daughter, Mia. The name struck him like a bullet to the chest. His head reeled, his vision blurred. How could he have forgotten her? His mind felt like it was being ripped apart, fragmented realities smashing together in a way that made him want to scream. Mia had been in the car that night. His 5-year-old daughter had been with him. And yet, he hadn't remembered her until now. Ethan staggered backward, the walls of his apartment closing in on him, the past and present colliding like a violent storm. The hallucinations, the time loops, the strange messages, the face in the back seat had, all of it, been leading him to this. The guilt, the grief, and the truth he refused to face. Ethan's hands were ice cold as he rushed out of his apartment, barely able to breathe. He didn't know where he was going, didn't know why his body was moving on its own, but something deep inside him screamed that he had missed something critical. His entire existence had become a puzzle, and he was still missing a piece. He jumped into his car, the same car where everything had started, the same car that had taken him into his nightmare. The passenger seat. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as he forced himself to look. The seat was empty, but for the first time, he saw something he hadn't before. A tiny smudge on the fabric. A fingerprint. Small. Too small to be his. Ethan's breath came out in a shudder as he reached forward, his fingers barely grazing the spotand. Suddenly, everything shifted. The car wasn't parked anymore. It was moving. The city outside blurred into streaks of light as the streetlights flashed past, the hum of the engine surrounding him like a whispering ghost. The radio crackled, the signal cutting in and out, static laced with distant voices. And then, a soft giggle. Ethan's entire body froze. The sound came from the back seat. His heart clenched as he turned, his soul bracing for the impossible. And there she was. A little girl, no older than 5. Her blonde hair fell in loose curls, her big bright blue eyes staring up at him, filled with something too knowing for a child. Daddy? Ethan couldn't breathe. His heart cracked wide open. Mia! She was here. But how? He reached for her, but his hand passed through the air. Not real. She wasn't real. His pulse roared in his ears, his vision swimming between past and present. He wanted to speak, wanted to tell her he was sorry, that he would never forget her again, but his mouth wouldn't move. His body wouldn't move. The radio flickered again, and this time, a voice whispered through the static. You left her behind. Ethan's chest tightened like a vice. The accident. The aftermath. Everyone had asked him the same question. How could he not remember the crash? He had told himself it was the trauma, the head injury. But no, he had blocked it out. Because he had left her there. Because the moment the impact hit, the moment the world had flipped upside down, Ethan had woken up alone. Mia was gone. And instead of facing that, his mind had rewritten the story. The hallucinations, the time loops, the voices, the woman in the back seat. It had all been his brain's way of keeping him from remembering the real nightmare. Not ghosts, not parallel versions of himself, but the horrifying truth that he had left his daughter behind in the wreckage and convinced himself she had never existed. Because accepting that loss, it would have destroyed him. Daddy, Mia whispered, her voice so soft, so fragile. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, baby. I should have come back for you. I should have. I know, she said simply, with a softness he didn't deserve. His entire body shook with grief. She was never in the hospital. She was never rescued. Because by the time he woke up, she was already gone. He had blocked it out, buried it, rewritten reality itself to keep himself from knowing. And all this time, Mia had been waiting for him to remember. The radio crackled one last time. The voice, the real one, the one inside him that had tried so hard to break through the illusion, spoke. "It's time to wake up, Ethan." The city outside the car began to dissolve. The colors bled away, the streetlights flickered out, the road beneath the tires crumbled into nothing. Ethan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was back in the real world. Back in his car. The apartment complex was still in front of him. The whiskey glass still sat on the table inside. The walls were still covered in forgotten photographs. And he was alone. For the first time, truly alone. But no, he remembered everything. Ethan exhaled, his entire body shaking. The nightmare was over. But the grief? That would never leave him. Because some passengers never reached their destination. And Mia had been one of them. Ethan sat in the driver's seat, his fingers gripping the wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white, his breath shallow and uneven, as the weight of everything crashed down on him all at once. His daughter was real. Mia had always been real. And she hadn't died that night. The memory broke open like a dam, the pieces rearranging themselves into something undeniable. The accident hadn't killed her. The impact, the sirens, the chaos afterward, all of it had been soaked in fear and confusion, and in the haze of his trauma, his mind had built a false narrative to protect itself. But now he remembered. Mia was alive, but she was in a coma. The hospital, the machines, the slow rhythmic beep of the monitors tracking her heartbeat. The doctors had said she might never wake up, that the damage was severe, that her mind might already be gone even if her body remained. But Ethan had never been able to face that possibility. So he had erased her. In his brokenness, in his desperation to escape the guilt of leaving her behind in that car, he had rewritten his entire reality. Mia had become the ghost in the back seat, the voice in the static, the child's laughter echoing through the streets. She had been trying to reach him not from the afterlife, but from the thin line between consciousness and oblivion. A world where she still existed, but couldn't move, couldn't wake, couldn't speak. And now Ethan knew why the hallucinations had always pulled him back to the same moment, the same road, the same impossible choice, because in the real world, he had already made the wrong one. He had run. He had buried his grief beneath endless drives and strangers' faces, drowning himself in long nights behind the wheel, pretending that reality had never shifted. But it had, and now he had to make it right. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for his phone, staring at the name he had ignored for so long, Mia's hospital. His thumb hovered over the call button, his chest tightening, his breath coming out in sharp gasps as a lifetime of denial threatened to pull him back into the illusion. But he couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. He pressed call. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then a voice on the other end. St. Mary's Intensive Care. How can I help you? Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. His voice was raw, barely a whisper. I need to see my daughter. The words felt heavy, foreign, like they had been locked away for years. But as soon as they left his mouth, the world around him felt real again. The hallucinations were gone. No more whispers in the static. No more flickering lights. No more shadows in the back seat. Just the hum of the city outside, the beating of his own heart, and the undeniable, heartbreaking truth. Mia was waiting for him. And this time, he wasn't going to leave her behind.